The morning light filtered through the large windows of New Geneva Station as Jake Miller walked quietly through the empty corridors toward the library. His soft footsteps echoed gently in the hallway as other beings slowly began their daily routines. Jake carried his usual cup of coffee and a small tablet containing the day's work schedule. He moved with the unhurried pace of someone who had found peace in routine. The library occupied 3 levels of the station's central hub. Thousands of data cores hummed softly behind protective barriers while holographic displays showed information from across the galaxy. Jake had spent 5 years organizing this vast collection of knowledge. He knew where to find anything from ancient Earth poetry to the latest scientific discoveries from the outer rim worlds. The other species on the station often remarked how perfectly suited humans seemed for this kind of work. Lisa Warren was already awake when Jake returned to their quarters 2 hours later. She stood at their window looking out at the stars while drinking her morning tea. Her diplomatic uniform was pressed and ready on the bed. Today she would meet with representatives from the Krillian Empire and the Etherian Collective. The negotiations had been going on for months with little progress. "How did the morning archival work go?" Lisa asked without turning around. She could see Jake's reflection in the window as he set down his coffee cup. "Found some interesting historical data about territorial disputes between similar species," Jake replied. "Might be useful for your talks today. The patterns tend to repeat themselves across different cultures." Lisa smiled and turned to face her husband. After 3 years of marriage, she still found comfort in his gentle way of speaking. Jake never raised his voice or showed anger even when dealing with the most difficult research requests. The other diplomats often commented that humans like Jake represented the best of what their species could become. "The Krillians are getting more aggressive in their demands," Lisa said as she began putting on her uniform. "They want 3 more systems, and they want the Etherians to give up their mining rights in the Kepler sector." Jake nodded while organizing the research files on his tablet. "The Etherians won't accept that. Their whole economy depends on those mining operations. Have you considered showing them the historical data about the Centauri Accords? Similar situation was resolved there about 200 years ago." "That's actually a good idea," Lisa said. "Can you prepare a summary for me to review during lunch break?" The couple finished their morning routine with the comfortable efficiency of people who had learned to work around each other's schedules. Jake gathered his library materials while Lisa collected her diplomatic files. They walked together toward the station's main level where their daily paths would separate. New Geneva Station housed over 50,000 beings from 12 different species. Humans made up only about 15% of the population, but they served in many important roles. Most worked as mediators, researchers, or administrators. The other species seemed to appreciate humanity's calm approach to problem-solving. The Xanthari Council representatives often praised humans for evolving beyond their primitive past. According to the official histories, humans had once been a warlike species but had learned to value peace and cooperation above conflict. This made them ideal for diplomatic work since they understood the costs of war and worked hard to prevent it. Jake spent his morning updating the cultural database with new information about Krillian social structures. The work required careful attention to detail since diplomatic mistakes could happen when species misunderstood each other's customs. He enjoyed this kind of research because it felt like he was helping to build understanding between different worlds. Around midday, Jake received a message from the station's security office. They wanted to review some historical files about human military organization for a routine security assessment. Jake gathered the requested materials and walked to the security level. The officer who met him was a tall Xanthari with the typical blue-gray skin and large eyes of his species. "Thank you for bringing these files," the officer said as he accepted the datapad. "We need to update our database about various species' defense capabilities." "Just routine paperwork for the quarterly reports." Jake nodded and prepared to leave. But the officer continued speaking. "It's interesting how much your species has changed over the past few centuries. These old military records show humans were quite formidable in combat. Hard to imagine looking at the peaceful people we work with today. People change when they have good reasons to change, Jake replied simply. Most humans today prefer books to battles. The Xanthari officer made a note on his tablet and dismissed Jake with thanks. As Jake walked back toward the library, he thought about the old military files. He had read them many times while organizing the historical archives. The records showed a species that had been very good at warfare but had chosen a different path. When they reached the stars, Lisa's afternoon negotiations went poorly. The Krillians rejected every compromise proposal and demanded even more territory than before. Their lead negotiator spoke with barely controlled aggression about taking what they wanted with or without diplomatic approval. The Etherian representatives became increasingly nervous as the talks continued. When Jake met Lisa for dinner that evening, she looked tired and frustrated. The station's dining area was busy with beings from various species sharing meals and conversation. Jake and Lisa found a quiet table near the observation windows. "They're not interested in real negotiations," Lisa said as she picked at her food. "The Krillians keep making bigger demands and threatening to walk away from the talks. I'm starting to think they're just buying time for something else." Jake listened while studying his wife's face. He had learned to read the subtle signs of her stress over their years together. "What kind of something else?" "I don't know," Lisa admitted. "But their behavior doesn't match standard negotiation patterns. They're acting like people who already know how this is going to end." That night, Jake lay awake thinking about Lisa's concerns. He had spent enough time studying conflict resolution to recognize when diplomatic processes were being used as cover for other activities. The Krillians' behavior suggested they were following a plan that didn't depend on the success of the negotiations. Jake got up quietly and went to his personal computer. He began reviewing recent communications traffic patterns and supply manifests for ships entering the sector. Most of the data was routine, but a few anomalies caught his attention. Several Krillian vessels had made course corrections that didn't match their stated destinations. The pattern was subtle, but it was there. He spent 2 more hours analyzing the data before returning to bed. Lisa was still sleeping peacefully beside him. Jake watched her for a moment before closing his eyes. Tomorrow he would continue his quiet work in the library while she faced another day of difficult negotiations. Neither of them suspected that their peaceful routine was about to end forever. The alarm sounded at 0347 station time, jolting Jake from deep sleep. Emergency lights bathed their quarters in red as the automated voice announced a missing diplomatic shuttle. Jake was fully awake before the announcement finished. Lisa should have returned from her evening meeting with the Etherian representatives 3 hours ago. Jake dressed quickly and made his way to the station's operations center. A crowd of concerned beings had gathered around the main display screens. The duty officer, a human named Pete Collins, was coordinating search efforts with obvious strain in his voice. "The shuttle left Etherian station on schedule," Pete explained to the assembled group. "Last contact was 47 minutes into the flight, then nothing. We've sent out search ships, but the area covers a lot of space." Jake moved closer to the technical displays showing the shuttle's planned route. The flight path took it through a relatively empty sector before connecting with the main shipping lanes back to New Geneva Station. It was a routine journey that Lisa had made dozens of times before. "What about the emergency beacon?" asked Dr. Susan Hart, the station's chief medical officer. "All diplomatic shuttles have them." Pete shook his head. "No signal. Either the beacon was destroyed or something is blocking the transmission. We're checking with nearby ships to see if anyone detected debris." Jake studied the flight path display while listening to the ongoing discussions around him. The shuttle had disappeared in a region with several small planets and asteroid fields. If something had gone wrong with the engines, Lisa could have attempted an emergency landing on one of the worlds in that area. "What about Kepler 442b?" Jake asked quietly. "It's within gliding range if the shuttle lost power at the last known position." Pete pulled up information about the planet on his screen. "Hostile environment. Dangerous wildlife and extreme weather patterns. If someone crashed there..." He didn't finish the sentence. The search continued for 6 hours without results. 3 patrol ships scanned the entire flight corridor while long-range sensors swept the surrounding systems. They found scattered debris that matched the shuttle's hull composition floating near Kepler 442b, but no signs of survivors. Station Commander Elizabeth Kane called a meeting at 1200 hours to discuss the situation. Jake sat in the back of the briefing room listening as the commander outlined the search efforts. The news was not encouraging. "We've recovered approximately 30% of the shuttle's outer hull," Commander Kane announced. "Initial analysis suggests a catastrophic failure of the main power systems. The debris pattern indicates the shuttle broke apart during atmospheric entry." Jake raised his hand. "What about the debris distribution? Does it match a mechanical failure or something else?" The commander looked at her technical advisor before answering. "The pattern is consistent with multiple system failures happening in rapid sequence. Could be mechanical or could be sabotage. We won't know until we recover more pieces." A Xanthari representative spoke up from the front row. "Should we assume this was an accident or begin treating it as a potential attack on diplomatic personnel?" "We're investigating all possibilities," the commander replied. "But I want to be clear about the recovery situation. Kepler 442b is a Class 4 hostile world. The atmosphere is breathable, but the surface conditions are extremely dangerous. Even if someone survived the crash, the chances of lasting more than a few days are very small." Jake felt something cold settle in his stomach. The way the commander spoke suggested they were already shifting from rescue to recovery operations. Standard procedure would be to wait 72 hours before officially declaring casualties, but everyone in the room understood the reality. After the meeting, Jake approached Pete Collins privately. "I want to take a scout ship to search the crash site." Pete looked surprised. "Jake, you heard what the commander said. It's too dangerous, and the chances of finding survivors are basically zero." "I need to see for myself," Jake replied. "If Lisa is down there, she's my wife. I can't just sit here waiting for official confirmation that she's dead." Pete studied Jake's face for a moment. "You have any experience with hostile environment operations?" Jake hesitated for just a second before answering. "I've done some wilderness survival training. I know what I'm getting into." "All right," Pete said finally. "I can authorize a scout ship for personal recovery purposes. But you'll be going alone, and I can't provide backup if you get into trouble." Jake spent the next 4 hours preparing for the mission. He requisitioned survival gear, medical supplies, and emergency rations from the station's stores. The quartermaster, a gruff human named Bill Hayes, questioned some of Jake's equipment choices, but approved the requests. "You sure you need all this tactical scanning equipment?" Bill asked as he processed the requisition. "This stuff is designed for military reconnaissance. I want to make sure I can find any debris or personal effects," Jake explained. "The better scanning gear will help me cover more ground efficiently." Bill shrugged and completed the paperwork. "Your call. Just remember that planet has some nasty predators." The last survey team reported pack hunters that use tools and coordinated tactics. Stay in the ship as much as possible. The scout ship Phoenix was a small but well-equipped vessel designed for single-person operations. Jake completed the pre-flight checks with methodical precision that impressed the flight deck crew. His movements around the ship's controls showed more familiarity with spacecraft systems than most civilians possessed. "Haven't seen you pilot before," commented the deck chief as Jake prepared to launch. "You sure you're qualified for solo flight?" "I have a civilian pilot's license," Jake replied while running through the navigation systems. "Used to do some freight runs before I started working in the library." The flight to Kepler 442b took 3 hours. Jake used the time to study detailed surveys of the planet's surface and atmospheric conditions. The world was geologically active with frequent seismic events and unpredictable weather patterns. The indigenous life forms included several species of large predators that the survey teams had classified as extremely dangerous. As the Phoenix approached the planet, Jake began receiving automated warnings about the hostile environment. The Ship's computer recommended maintaining orbital distance and using remote sensors for any surface investigations. Jake acknowledged the warnings but continued his descent toward the crash site. The debris field was scattered across approximately 10 square kilometers of rough terrain. Jake's scanners detected hull fragments, equipment pieces, and what appeared to be personal belongings spread throughout the area. He set the Phoenix down on a stable ridge overlooking the main crash site. Jake spent several minutes studying the distribution pattern of the wreckage before leaving the ship. Something about the debris placement bothered him, but he couldn't identify exactly what seemed wrong. The pieces were spread out in a way that suggested the shuttle had broken apart at high altitude rather than during ground impact. The first piece of debris Jake examined was a section of the passenger compartment. The metal showed signs of extreme heat damage, but the tears in the hull looked clean. Too clean for random mechanical failure. Jake moved to the next large piece and found similar damage patterns. After an hour of careful examination, Jake was certain the shuttle had been sabotaged. The damage showed clear signs of directed explosions rather than system malfunctions. Someone had planted charges designed to destroy the shuttle during flight while making it look like an accident. Jake activated his personal communicator to report his findings, but discovered that something was jamming the signal. The interference was too focused to be natural. Someone didn't want information about the crash site reaching New Geneva Station. As Jake continued his investigation, the afternoon light began to fade. The planet's short day cycle meant he would soon be working in darkness. That was when he heard the first howl echoing across the rocky landscape. Then another. And another. The survey reports had been right about the predators. Jake could hear at least 6 different voices calling to each other from various directions around the crash site. They were coordinating their approach like a military unit preparing for an assault. Jake quickly gathered the evidence he had collected and began moving back toward his ship. The howling was getting closer, and he could see movement in the shadows between the larger debris pieces. Whatever was hunting him was smart enough to use the wreckage for cover. He was 50 meters from the Phoenix when he saw the first predator clearly. It was roughly the size of a large Volf, but moved with disturbing intelligence. The creature was carrying something in its mouth that looked like a primitive tool. Behind it, Jake could see several more shapes moving through the darkness. Jake broke into a run toward his ship while the pack closed in around him. The predators moved with coordinated precision that suggested they had hunted humans before. As Jake reached the Phoenix's boarding ramp, he realized that Lisa might still be alive somewhere on this hostile world. If she had survived the crash, she was being hunted by the same intelligent pack predators that were now surrounding his ship. The creatures tested the Phoenix's defenses throughout the night, probing for weaknesses while Jake monitored their movements from inside. By morning, he had counted at least 12 individuals working together with tactical. Jake left the Phoenix at first light, moving with a quiet efficiency that would have surprised anyone who knew him as the station's librarian. The pack predators had withdrawn during the early morning hours, but he could still sense their presence in the surrounding rocks. They were watching him, learning his patterns, waiting for the right moment to attack. The trail he followed was barely visible to most eyes, but Jake read the signs like words on a page. Broken vegetation, disturbed soil, small tears in fabric caught on sharp rocks. Lisa had survived the initial crash and managed to walk away from the main debris field. She was injured based on the irregular spacing of her footprints, but she was alive. Jake moved through the rocky terrain with careful steps that made almost no sound. His breathing was controlled, and his eyes constantly scanned the environment for threats. The gentle librarian who had spent years organizing peaceful archives was gone. In his place was someone who understood how to survive in hostile territory. The trail led away from the crash site toward a series of low hills dotted with cave openings. Jake paused frequently to check his surroundings and listen for the sounds of pursuing predators. The pack was still out there somewhere, probably following his scent while staying just out of sight. After 2 hours of tracking, Jake found evidence that Lisa had rested near a small stream. Boot prints in the soft mud showed she had stopped to drink water and treat her injuries. Torn fabric from her diplomatic uniform suggested. She had used it to bandage a wound on her left leg. Jake knelt beside the stream and studied the area more carefully. Lisa had spent at least an hour here based on the number of footprints and the way the vegetation was disturbed. She had also taken time to gather some edible plants that grew near the water. The woman was thinking clearly and trying to conserve her strength. The predator tracks around the stream told a different story. The pack had found Lisa's trail and followed her to this location. They had arrived several hours after she left, but they were definitely hunting her. Jake could see where they had tested different approaches to the stream, learning about her scent and movement patterns. Jake filled his water containers and continued following the trail toward the hills. The track showed that Lisa was moving more slowly now, probably due to increasing fatigue and pain from her injuries. The predators were gaining ground with each passing hour. The first cave opening Jake investigated was empty but showed signs of recent occupation. Lisa had sheltered here for part of the night before moving on. She had tried to conceal her presence by brushing away footprints and removing any obvious traces of human activity. It was a smart approach, but the predators were too skilled to be fooled for long. Jake examined the cave entrance more carefully and found something that made his blood run cold. Scratch marks on the rock walls showed where the pack had tried to dig their way inside while Lisa was hiding. She had escaped, but they had come very close to reaching her. The trail from the cave led higher into the hills toward a more defensible position. Lisa was thinking tactically now, choosing routes that would give her advantages against pursuit. Jake began to understand that his wife had more survival training than he had realized. The afternoon sun was getting lower when Jake heard the first howl echoing from the valley below. The pack had found his trail and was beginning to close the distance. They were smart enough to understand that two humans in their territory meant more prey than they usually encountered. Jake quickened his pace while maintaining his careful movement pattern. He needed to find Lisa before the predators found either of them. The trail was becoming easier to follow as Lisa's condition deteriorated, but that also meant the pack would have no trouble tracking her. The next cave system was larger and more complex than the previous ones. Jake could see where Lisa had explored several different passages before choosing one that led deeper into the hillside. She was looking for a place where she could defend herself against multiple attackers. Jake followed her path into the cave network, moving cautiously through the narrow passages. His eyes adapted quickly to the dim light filtering in from various openings. The caves were old and had been carved by water over thousands of years. They formed a natural maze that could provide good defensive positions for someone who understood how to use them. Deep in the cave system, Jake found evidence of a struggle. Broken stalactites, disturbed rock formations, and dark stains on the stone floor told the story of a fight between Lisa and at least 3 predators. She had managed to kill one of them using a sharp piece of metal from the shuttle wreckage, but the others had escaped. The blood trail from the fight led deeper into the caves toward what appeared to be a dead end. Jake moved carefully through the passage, aware that Lisa might be injured and possibly unconscious somewhere ahead. He also knew the surviving predators could be waiting in ambush. Jake found Lisa in a small chamber at the end of the passage. She was conscious but barely conscious, sitting with her back against the rock wall and holding a makeshift spear made from shuttle debris. Her left leg was badly injured, and she had lost a significant amount of blood from multiple wounds. "Jake," Lisa whispered when she recognized him in the dim light. "How did you find me?" "Followed your trail," Jake replied as he moved to examine her injuries. "We need to get you medical attention, but first we have to get out of these caves." Lisa gripped his arm weakly. "There are more of them out there. They've been testing the cave entrance for hours, trying to find a way to reach me. They're too smart, Jake. They use tools and they coordinate their attacks like soldiers." Jake was already opening his medical kit and beginning to treat Lisa's wounds. His hands moved with practiced efficiency as he cleaned the injuries and applied emergency bandages. "How many did you see?" "At least 6 in the main pack, but I think there are more. They hunt in groups and they learn from each encounter." "Look. One I killed was testing my defenses while the others watched from cover. Jake helped Lisa drink some water while he considered their situation. They were trapped in a cave system with limited exits while intelligent predators controlled the surrounding area. Lisa was too injured to move quickly and they would be vulnerable during any attempt to reach his ship. "I need to tell you something," Jake said quietly as he finished treating her wounds. "The shuttle crash wasn't an accident. Someone sabotaged your ship and they're jamming communications to prevent rescue operations." Lisa stared at him in the dim light. "The Krillians?" "Most likely. This was planned to look like an accident while eliminating you as a diplomatic threat. They probably expected the predators to destroy any evidence of sabotage." "Then no one is coming to look for us," Lisa realized. "The station thinks we're both dead." Jake was quiet for a moment before responding. "No one else is coming, but we're not dead yet." The howling outside the cave had stopped, which Jake recognized as a bad sign. The pack was preparing for a coordinated assault on their position. They had probably spent the afternoon studying the cave system and identifying all possible escape routes. Jake checked his remaining equipment and weapons. He had basic survival gear and some improvised tools, but nothing designed for combat against intelligent predators. Lisa was in no condition to fight and could barely walk without assistance. "Jake," Lisa said softly, "I need to ask you something and I need you to tell me the truth." Jake looked at his wife, seeing the question in her eyes that he had been dreading for years. "You're not really just a librarian, are you?" Jake was quiet for a long moment, listening to the sounds of movement outside their hiding place. The predators were positioning themselves for an attack, and he was running out of time to maintain the peaceful fiction he had built around his new life. "No," he admitted finally, "I'm not just a librarian." The first predator appeared at the cave entrance just as the last of the afternoon light faded into darkness. Jake could see its eyes reflecting the dim illumination from deeper in the cave system. Behind it, he could sense the presence of the rest of the pack taking positions for a coordinated assault. Jake moved to place himself between Lisa and the approaching threats. As he did, something fundamental changed in his posture and movement patterns. The gentle academic disappeared entirely, replaced by someone who understood violence in ways that most peaceful beings never would. "Stay behind me," Jake told Lisa, in a voice she had never heard before. "And whatever happens, don't look away. You're about to see who I really am." The first predator entered the cave with careful steps, testing each movement before committing its weight. Jake watched its approach with complete stillness, every muscle ready, but not yet committed to action. Behind the lead creature he could sense at least 5 others positioning themselves at different points around the cave entrance. Lisa gripped her makeshift spear tighter as she watched Jake prepare to face the pack. Something in his posture had changed completely from the gentle man she thought she knew. He held his body like someone who had faced death many times before and learned not to fear it. The lead predator was within 3 meters when Jake moved. His action was so sudden and precise that Lisa barely saw what happened. One moment, Jake was standing motionless near the cave wall. The next moment, the predator was dead with a piece of sharp rock buried in its skull, and Jake was already moving toward the next threat. 2 more predators rushed into the cave together, hoping to overwhelm Jake with coordinated attacks from different angles. They had clearly learned hunting tactics that worked against most prey, but they had never faced anything like what Jake had become. He moved between their attacks like water flowing around rocks, never where they expected him to be when their claws and teeth tried to find him. Jake used the narrow cave passage to his advantage, forcing the predators to approach him one at a time despite their superior numbers. His improvised weapons were pieces of shuttle debris and sharp rocks, but he wielded them with deadly efficiency. Each movement served multiple purposes, defending against one attack while setting up counterattacks. Against the next threat, Lisa watched in shock as Jake systematically eliminated the pack members who entered the cave. His methods were brutal but precisely calculated to end each fight as quickly as possible. There was no wasted motion, no unnecessary violence, Just clinical efficiency in removing threats to their survival. When the cave fell silent, Jake moved to the entrance and listened carefully to the sounds outside. 2 predators remained alive, but they had retreated to reconsider their approach. Jake used the brief pause to check on Lisa and assess their tactical situation. "How many more are out there?" Lisa asked as Jake knelt beside her to examine her. "Bandages, 2 that I can detect, but there might be others," Jake replied while cleaning blood from his improvised weapons. "They're regrouping and probably calling for reinforcements from other packs in the area." Lisa stared at her husband as he calmly prepared for the next phase of the fight. "Jake, where did you learn to do that? No librarian moves like you just moved." Jake was quiet for a moment as he considered how much truth to reveal. The gentle fiction of his peaceful life was already destroyed, but some secrets were harder to share than others. "I used to be in the military," Jake said finally. "Special operations. I left that life behind when I realized what it was turning me into." "What kind of special operations?" Jake met her eyes in the dim light. "The kind that other soldiers don't talk about. The kind that handles problems too dangerous or too sensitive for regular military units." Before Lisa could ask more questions, the howling started again outside the cave. But this time it was different. More voices coming from multiple directions, with a coordination that suggested the local packs were joining forces against the humans in their territory. Jake listened to the sounds and mentally mapped the positions of their enemies. At least 12 individuals were surrounding the cave system, probably more arriving every few minutes. The predators were treating this as a major threat that required overwhelming force to eliminate. "We can't stay here," Jake announced as he gathered their remaining supplies. "They're bringing in enough numbers to siege us out or rush us from multiple directions simultaneously." "I can barely walk," Lisa reminded him. "How are we supposed to get past 12 of those things?" Jake helped Lisa to her feet and tested her ability to move through the cave passages. She was weak from blood loss and pain, but she could manage a slow walking pace with his support. "We're not going past them," Jake explained as he led Lisa toward a different section of the cave system. "We're going through them." Jake had spent the afternoon mentally mapping the cave network while following Lisa's trail. He had identified several passages that connected to other openings in the hillside. The predators were watching the main entrance, but they couldn't cover every possible exit point simultaneously. As they moved through the caves, Jake began explaining his background to Lisa in quiet words that revealed years of carefully hidden truth. He had served in the Terra Defense Corps, humanity's most elite military unit. His specialty was asymmetric warfare in hostile environments against technologically superior enemies. "I spent 8 years fighting in places that don't officially exist against enemies that governments don't acknowledge," Jake said as they navigated a narrow passage between cave chambers. "Every mission was classified beyond any normal security level." "Why did you leave?" Jake helped Lisa climb over a section of fallen rocks before answering. "Because I was becoming something that scared me. The Corps trains you to be effective in ways that most people can't imagine. After a while, you realize that once you cross certain lines, you can never go back to being a normal person." They reached a side passage that Jake had identified as leading to an exit point on the opposite side of the hill from where the predators were concentrated. But as they approached the opening, Jake heard movement outside that indicated their enemies had anticipated this strategy. "They're learning our patterns," Jake observed as he listened to the positioning sounds outside. "These creatures are more intelligent than the survey reports indicated." Jake left Lisa in a defensive position while he moved ahead to scout their escape route. The passage led to an opening about 50 meters above the main valley floor, with a steep but manageable descent to the rocks below. 3 predators were watching this exit, but their attention was focused outward toward the valley rather than up toward the cave opening. Jake returned to Lisa and outlined their situation. "I can eliminate the 3 guards, but it will alert every other predator in the area to our position. Once we start moving, we'll have maybe 10 minutes to reach my ship before the entire pack converges on us." "Can we make it to your ship in 10 minutes with me moving this slowly?" Jake considered the distance and terrain between their current position and where he had left the Phoenix. Under normal circumstances, it would be a 30-minute hike. With Lisa's injuries and the need to avoid detection, it could take much longer. Not unless I clear the path ahead of us, Jake admitted. Which means I'll have to engage multiple groups of predators simultaneously while protecting you during the movement. Lisa studied her husband's face in the dim light filtering into the cave. The gentle man she had married was still there, but underneath she could now see something much more dangerous. Something that had been carefully hidden for years but was now emerging in response to their desperate situation. "What aren't you telling me about your military service?" Lisa asked quietly. Jake was silent for a long moment before answering. "The Terra Defense Corps doesn't just train soldiers. They train people to become living weapons. People who can operate alone behind enemy lines for months at a time. People who can turn entire planets into hunting grounds when their mission requires it. And you were one of these living weapons?" Jake nodded slowly. "I was the best one they ever produced. That's why I had to leave. I realized that if I stayed in that life much longer, there wouldn't be enough humanity left in me to remember why I was fighting in the first place." The howling outside was getting closer as more predator packs arrived to join the siege. Jake estimated they now faced at least 20 intelligent hunters, who were coordinating their efforts to eliminate the human threat in their territory. "Jake," Lisa said softly, "I need you to promise me something." "What?" "Promise me that no matter what happens here, you won't lose yourself completely to whatever you used to be." "I married Jake Miller the librarian, not Jake Miller the living weapon." Jake looked at his wife for a long moment before responding. "I promise I'll try to remember the difference." Jake moved to the cave opening and began preparing for what he knew would be the most difficult tactical operation of his life. He had to get Lisa safely to his ship while fighting through 20 intelligent predators, using only improvised weapons and survival gear. In his military days, he would have called it a suicide mission, but Jake Miller the librarian was married to the woman behind him. And Jake Miller the living weapon had never failed a mission when the stakes were this high. Jake moved like death itself through the predator positions surrounding the cave system. His years of peaceful library work had not dulled the skills that the Terra Defense Corps had burned into his muscle memory. Each movement was calculated to eliminate threats while conserving energy for the longer battle ahead. The first 3 predators died before they understood they were under attack. Jake used the terrain and darkness to approach from angles they hadn't anticipated, striking with improvised weapons that found vital points with surgical precision. He made no sound that would alert the other pack members to his presence. Lisa followed Jake's path at a distance, moving as quietly as possible despite her injuries. She could see the bodies of the predators that Jake had eliminated, but she couldn't see Jake himself. He moved through the hostile environment like he had become part of it, invisible until the moment he chose to strike. The descent from the cave opening to the valley floor took 15 minutes of careful movement. Jake cleared the path ahead, while Lisa navigated the steep rocks with growing exhaustion. Her bandages were holding, but the constant movement was aggravating her injuries and sapping her remaining strength. Halfway to the Phoenix, the predator packs realized their quarry had escaped the cave system. The howling that erupted from the hillsides carried a note of frustrated anger that echoed across the valley. Within minutes, Jake could hear the sounds of coordinated movement as the surviving pack members began converging on their position. "How many are left?" Lisa asked as they paused behind a large boulder to rest. Jake listened to the approaching sounds, while mentally tracking the positions of their pursuers. 15, maybe 16. They're spreading out to cut off our escape routes while the main group follows our trail. Can we reach your ship before they catch us? Jake studied the terrain between their current position and where he had left the Phoenix. The direct route was across open ground that would leave them exposed to attack from multiple directions. The safer path would take too long and allow the predators to establish blocking positions. Not